You know, power doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it enters quietly, shifts the atmosphere, and leaves everyone wondering why they suddenly feel small in your presence. Chosen one. They didn't see you coming, not because you were hiding, but because they were too busy looking down on you to notice you were rising. See, they thought the silence meant you'd given up. They mistook your patience for weakness. They believed the betrayal, the isolation, the whispered conversations behind your back would finish you off. But here's what they never understood. You weren't breaking, you were building. Brick by broken brick, you were constructing a foundation they could never shake. And now you walk differently. Not louder, not desperate for attention, but with a calm authority that commands every room you step into. It's not arrogance. It's not revenge. It's the quiet confidence of someone who survived what was meant to destroy them and came back owning the very ground they were once pushed to kneel on. They're triggered now, aren't they? Confused by the fact that you don't flinch anymore. Offended that you no longer explain yourself. Shaken by how effortlessly you carry a power they can't imitate and can't control. Let me tell you something. They're not allergic to your presence. They're choking on the realization that you're the boss now, and the game they played, you rewrote the rules without even telling them. In this video, we're not here to play small or sugarcoat reality. We're diving deep into why your rise has exposed everything fake around you. Why your dominance isn't about proving anything. It's about being everything God designed you to be. So, if you're feeling that shift in your spirit, if you know deep down that you've stepped into a version of yourself that no longer asks for permission, then stay with me, because we're about to break down the truths behind your unstoppable energy and why they'll never be able to put you back in a box you've already outgrown. Oh, and before we dive in, if you know you're walking into this season fully aligned with your purpose, hit that like button, subscribe, and comment 333 below to affirm, I'm no longer shrinking, I am the standard now. Let's get into it. Section 1. Resurrection energy. You weren't just built, you were forged. Let's get something clear right from the start. You didn't just bounce back, no chosen one. You resurrected. See, people love a comeback story, but they were never rooting for yours. Truth is, they didn't think you could come back. They weren't just hoping you'd fail. They designed it. They set the traps, whispered the lies, and watched as life buried you under betrayal, silence, and isolation. But here's where their plan fell apart. They forgot one crucial thing. You weren't just some ordinary soul trying to survive the storm. You were called to be refined by it. While they were celebrating your downfall, thinking the dirt they threw was your burial ground, heaven was calling that same dirt your foundation. And when everyone turned their backs thinking your story was over, that's when God whispered, "Now watch what I do with this one." You see, resurrection isn't about returning to who you were. It's about rising as someone they can no longer recognize, someone stronger, wiser, and untouchable in ways they can't decode. They thought the silence would crush you, but silence became your sanctuary. They thought isolation would break you, but isolation became your training ground. While they were busy counting you out, you were counting every lesson, every scar that turned into armor, every tear that watered the roots of a version of you that cannot be shaken. And now look at you, walking with a calm fire, not needing to shout, not needing to prove. Because when you've been resurrected, your presence speaks louder than any words ever could. That's why they're uncomfortable now. It's not just that you survived, it's that you came back different, upgraded, elevated. You're no longer playing in the sandbox they built for you. They tried to bury you, but they didn't know you were a seed. And here's the thing about seeds. When they break through the surface, they don't apologize for growing. They don't shrink because others preferred them hidden beneath the dirt. Now, every time they see you, they're reminded reminded that you witnessed every betrayal. You felt every knife in your back. You heard every fake cheer and every secret plot. And still you rose. That's not survival. That's divine strategy. Because true power isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't need applause. It enters quietly, shifts the atmosphere, and leaves everyone wondering how you became untouchable without them noticing. But you know exactly what it cost. The nights no one saw, the battles fought in silence, the moments you held yourself together with nothing but faiths. And now they're offended. Not because you fought back, but because you elevated without ever swinging. That's what they can't process. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't need to. Your rise was the answer. Understand this, chosen one. When God resurrects you, He doesn't just restore what was lost. He multiplies it. He makes sure that those who tried to write your ending are forced to witness your new beginning. One they have no control over, and that's exactly where you stand now. In a position they never imagined you'd reach, not because you forced your way in, but because you were called to it. So don't ever downplay this season of your life. You didn't just get lucky. You didn't stumble into strength. You were forged in silence, refined in betrayal, resurrected by divine design. And now, you walk as living proof that what was meant to bury you was really just the soil God used to grow a force they can't contain. This is your resurrection energy, not temporary, not fragile, but eternal, because it was never built by man, it was ordained. So when they look at you with confusion, fear, or even bitterness, smile, because they're not seeing arrogance. They're witnessing what it looks like when someone rises by grace and answers to a higher call. And chosen one, that's only the beginning. Section 2. Why you became the standard without trying. You know what really unsettles them, chosen one. It's not that you're winning, it's that you're winning without even playing their game. See, while they were busy competing, you were creating. While they chased validation trends and applause, you stayed focused on something they could never understand: alignment. You didn't rise because you fought for a spotlight. You rose because you stayed in your lane, a lane God carved specifically for you. And here's the truth they don't want to admit. You became the standard, not because you were louder, flashier, or more aggressive, but because you were authentic in a world addicted to imitation. They were too busy watching each other, copying moves, mimicking success, and trying to outshine shadows, while you were quietly mastering your craft, building substance over spectacle. And now they're scrambling, because the finish line they were racing toward, it leads straight to you. But here's where it gets even more uncomfortable for them. You never saw them as competition, because you weren't competing. You were becoming. That's the difference. They hustle for attention. You move in purpose. They measure success by numbers, noise, and approval. You measure it by peace, alignment, and legacy. And now, every step you take reminds them that real power doesn't have to announce itself. It doesn't chase followers. It doesn't beg to be noticed. It simply is. That's why your presence is unsettling. Because when someone walks in their truth, it exposes everyone who's still performing theirs. They thought you were behind. They thought your silence was stagnation. But you weren't standing still. You were rooting deeper. And now that your fruit is visible, they're realizing something painful. You can't fake what you've cultivated. See, chosen one. When you're aligned with divine timing, you don't have to rush. You don't have to prove. You don't have to shout over the noise. Your consistency, your patience, your quiet discipline, those became your signature. While they exhausted themselves trying to keep up with a world that changes its mind every day, you built something eternal. And here's the irony. The very things they mocked you for, your patience, your humility, your focus, became the pillars of a foundation they can't replicate. They don't understand how you walk into rooms now and instantly shift the energy, how you command respect without demanding it. It's because you carry something they can't buy, borrow, or steal. Authenticity. You didn't flex your way to the top. You didn't scheme or cut corners. You let your essence do the talking. And now every glance, every silent move you make reminds them that you didn't just elevate, you redefined the game. They're still trying to impress crowds. You're focused on fulfilling a calling. They're addicted to being seen. You're anchored in being aligned. That's why they're triggered. Not because you're arrogant, but because you made success look effortless, when in reality it was built on years of unseen discipline, sacrifice, and faith. You became the blueprint without advertising it. You became the example they secretly study, even if their pride won't let them admit it. But remember this, chosen one. When you're truly walking in purpose, your life becomes a silent teacher. You won't need to correct them. You won't need to defend your path. Your results will speak louder than any explanation ever could. So keep moving with that quiet confidence. Keep showing up without the need to compete. Because the truth is, you were never in their race. You were too busy building a kingdom they didn't even know was possible. And now that they see it, they realize the one they overlooked, the one they thought was too quiet, too humble, too different, was setting the standard all along. You don't just walk in power, you are the power. And that's something they'll never be able to copy. Section 3. Turning humiliation into unstoppable momentum. Chosen one. Let's talk about one of the greatest misunderstandings your enemies ever had. They thought humiliation would destroy you. They believed if they could mock you enough, laugh at you, loud enough, drag your name through enough dirt, you'd break. That's the game they played. Feed you shame and watch you shrink. But here's what they'll never comprehend. You weren't built to crumble under pressure. You were designed to convert it. Every whisper behind your back, every public embarrassment, every side eye and smirk, they weren't breaking you down. They were building a fire inside you they couldn't see. See, most people fold when the crowd turns against them. Most people let shame silence them. But not you. You did something rare. You took every ounce of that humiliation and you transformed it into momentum. You didn't lash out. You didn't beg to be understood. You didn't try to clear your name in rooms where people were committed to misunderstanding you. No, you stayed still, you stayed silent. But not because you were defeated, because you were calculating. You let their laughter echo, knowing that one day the same mouths that mocked you would fall silent when they saw what you became. You see, chosen one, real strength isn't proven when people cheer for you. It's proven when they laugh at you and you keep moving anyway. What they intended to use as a weapon became your fuel. They handed you rejection and you turned it into resilience. They served you shame and you forged it into unshakable self-worth. And now they're uncomfortable. Not because you clapped back, but because you glowed up without ever needing to stoop to their level. They thought their insults would define you, but you let them refine you. They expected you to disappear in the shadows they cast over you. Instead, you learned how to shine without needing anyone to turn the lights on for you. That's why your presence is so unsettling today. Because when you walk into a room, they're not just seeing who you are now, they're being reminded of everything they tried to do to you. Every fake conversation, every public spectacle they made at your expense, every time they thought, this will be the moment that breaks them. But you didn't break, you built. You built patience. You built discernment. You built a level of emotional intelligence that no book could have taught you. Only experience. And now, chosen one, you walk differently. Not with bitterness, but with a calm, collected authority that says, I remember, but I'm no longer bound by it. That's what terrifies them the most. You don't carry revenge in your heart. You carry clarity. You've mastered the art of turning pain into power without ever announcing it. And when someone can take humiliation and turn it into a platform, they become unstoppable. So don't regret those moments where they tried to tear you down in front of others. Those were divine setups. Opportunities for you to discover a version of yourself that doesn't rely on external validation. Because now you don't flinch when they talk. You don't shrink when they stare. You don't explain when they whisper. You've outgrown their tactics. You've outgrown their smallness. And here's the beautiful truth. The very people who tried to shame you are now living in the shadow of your strength. They can't undo what they did, and they can't unsee what you've become. So wear that history like armor, chosen one, not as a wound, but as a reminder that every attempt to humiliate you only made your rise more glorious. And now you don't just walk with confidence, you walk with a quiet power that says, "Thank you for the lessons, but I'll take it from here." Section 4. Unleashed Power. Why You'll Never Shrink Again. There was a time, chosen one, when you dimmed your light just to make others feel comfortable, when you held your tongue, shrunk your presence, and made yourself small because the world told you that being too much was dangerous. They called it humility. They told you to stay grounded, to not outshine others, to be modest. But let's be real. What they really meant was, don't remind us of what we're too afraid to become. You weren't being asked to be humble. You were being asked to hide. And for a while, you listened. You silenced your ideas. You softened your voice. You kept your victories quiet. Not because you lacked power, but because you were taught that your power made others uncomfortable. But here's the truth, and I know you feel it now. That version of you, the one who played small to keep the peace, that version is gone. You've reached a point where you no longer apologize for existing in your fullness. You're no longer watering yourself down so others don't drown in their insecurities. Because you finally realized your light was never the problem. Their fear of shining was. And now that you've unleashed who you really are, they're panicking. Why? Because the control they had over you only worked when you doubted yourself. When you second-guessed every step. When you kept asking, "Is this too much?" But now you know better. Now you understand that your voice, your presence, your ideas, they weren't meant to be confined. You weren't designed to fit in. You were born to stand out. And standing out isn't arrogance. It's alignment. See, when you finally give yourself permission to be everything God called you to be, you disrupt every environment built on mediocrity and fear. Your confidence doesn't come from ego. It comes from release. It's the sound of shackles hitting the floor after years of being told to stay in your place. And now that you walk freely in your authority, every step reminds them of what they tried to suppress. They say, "You've changed." But what they really mean is, you stopped making yourself small for us. And they're right. You have changed. You've awakened to the truth that your power was never meant to be caged for anyone's comfort. You don't ask for permission anymore. You don't tone it down. You don't hold back your ideas, your dreams, your presence, just to protect fragile egos. And yes, your confidence feels loud to those who benefited from your silence. But that's not your burden to carry. Because here's the thing. Chosen one, you're not being too much. You're being everything you were created to be. And if that rattles people, so be it. You spent too many seasons suffocating under the weight of playing small. Now you breathe freely in rooms that once tried to shrink you. That's why they're triggered. Not because you're overstepping, but because you finally realized that you were never meant to stay in the corner they assigned you. You were meant to own the space. So from this point forward, never apologize for taking up room. Never shrink so others can feel tall. Never silence your brilliance to soothe someone else's insecurity. Your unleashed power isn't just about you, it's about the example you set for others, still trapped in the lie that they have to dim their light to be accepted. You broke free, and that freedom, it's loud even when you say nothing. Because true power isn't in how much noise you make. It's in how undeniable your presence becomes once you stop hiding. So stand tall, speak clearly, move boldly, because you've already spent enough time shrinking. Now it's time to expand, and if they can't handle that, let them adjust their vision. You're not going back to who you were. Not now, not ever. Section 5. Mastering the game they trapped you in. Chosen one. They thought they had you exactly where they wanted you, deep inside their system, where the rules were rigged, the truth was punished, and silence was expected. You know the kind of places I'm talking about. Toxic family dynamics where loyalty meant keeping quiet about dysfunction. Workplaces where your talent was seen as a threat, not a gift. Relationships where love was just a tool for control. They didn't just want you present, they wanted you obedient, blind to the games, numb to the manipulation, grateful for crumbs. But here's where their plan backfired. While they thought you were trapped, you were actually studying. See, survival wasn't your only mission, you were decoding every move they made. While they played mind games, you were watching patterns. While they shifted rules to keep you off balance, you were gaining clarity. While they whispered in circles, you were learning exactly who thrives in chaos and who hides behind fake smiles. They thought you were just enduring, but you were absorbing wisdom they didn't even know they were handing you. You weren't just surviving behind enemy lines, you were becoming fluent in their language of manipulation. And now that you've walked out of that system, you're not just free, you're dangerous. Because there's nothing more powerful than someone who's seen the game from the inside and knows they'll never fall for it again. They can't guilt trip you anymore. They can't confuse you with gaslighting or subtle control tactics. You've seen behind the curtain. You know who pulls the strings, and more importantly, you know how to cut them. That's why they're nervous now. Because the same traps they set for you before, you step over them without blinking. They can't figure out how you became so unreadable. How you went from being predictable and pliable to calm, composed, and untouchable. It's simple. They trained you without realizing it. Every betrayal sharpened your discernment. Every lie strengthened your intuition. Every setup taught you how to navigate without revealing your next move. You didn't read about resilience in a book. You lived it. And now when people try to run the same old games, you don't react. You don't explain. You just let them expose themselves because you already know how that story ends. Chosen one. This isn't paranoia. This is wisdom, earned in the trenches. You learned to master a system designed to keep you small. And once you understand the blueprint, you become uncontrollable. That's why your energy feels so unsettling to manipulators now. They can't predict you. They can't guilt you. They can't bait you into emotional chaos. Because you're no longer playing. You're operating. You don't move out of fear anymore. You move out of strategy, guided by clarity, rooted in purpose. And here's the best part. You don't even need to expose them. Your presence does that all on its own. Because when someone walks in knowing exactly how the game is played, they never have to raise their voice or prove a point. They've already won by refusing to engage. So let them wonder how you got so sharp. Let them question how you see through every facade. Because the truth is, they handed you the keys when they tried to lock you in. And now, you hold the mastery they never intended for you to have. You're out of their system, but the wisdom that stays with you forever. And that chosen one is why they can never trap you again. Section 7. You are the mirror, and that's why they flinch. Chosen one. Let's get real about why some people can't look you in the eye anymore. It's not because you wronged them. It's not because you've changed for the worse. It's because every time they see you now, they're forced to face themselves. You've become something far more uncomfortable than an opponent or a memory. You've become a mirror, and not the kind that flatters, not the kind that smooths out the edges or hides the truth. No, you reflect exactly what they tried to avoid. See, you didn't evolve to prove anything to anyone. You grew because staying the same was suffocating your spirit. You did the inner work, the kind that no one applauds because it's messy, lonely, and quiet. You sat with truths that others run from. You let go of stories that kept you small. You chose discipline over comfort, clarity over chaos, and purpose over popularity. And now, your very existence challenges those who chose the easy path. When they look at you, they don't just see someone who rose. They see every excuse they told themselves about why they didn't. You're living proof that their limits weren't destiny. They were decisions. And that's a hard pill to swallow. They say things like, "You've changed." But what they really mean is, you outgrew the version of you I could control. You no longer fit into the box where they felt superior. You're no longer the self-doubting, approval-seeking version they were comfortable manipulating. Now you're self-aware. You're grounded. You move with intention. And that unsettles people who are still trapped in cycles of blame, fear, and stagnation. It's not your light they hate. It's the shadow it casts over their unfulfilled potential. Because every time you win, every time you speak with clarity, every time you show up fully in your power, it reminds them of the work they avoided, the dreams they abandoned, the growth they feared. You didn't become better to make them feel worse, but your rise exposes the places where they chose comfort over courage. And here's the truth. Chosen one. Some people will never celebrate you. Not because you did anything wrong, but because clapping for you feels like confessing they settled. You're a walking contradiction to their narrative. You weren't supposed to break free. You weren't supposed to thrive after everything you faced. But you did. And now your presence disrupts their denial. That's why they avoid you. That's why conversations feel tense. It's not jealousy in the typical sense. It's conviction. You remind them of what's possible, and that terrifies those who've built their identity around playing small. But here's where you stand tall. You don't shrink to make them comfortable anymore. You don't downplay your growth just to avoid making others face their reflection. Because your life isn't a stage for their comfort. It's a testament to what happens when you choose evolution over excuses. So let them flinch. Let them look away. Let them call you different. Because you are. You did what they wouldn't. You faced yourself, you did the work, and now you walk in a freedom they can't understand. And if your presence exposes their stagnation, that's not your burden to carry. That's their opportunity to wake up. Remember this, chosen one. You weren't called to dim your light for anyone's convenience. You were called to shine so brightly that it illuminates truth, even if that truth makes people uncomfortable. You are the mirror now. And while they may hate what they see, never forget, mirrors don't cause the flaws, they just reveal them. Stand firm. Keep reflecting. Growth, strength, and authenticity. Because the ones who are ready to evolve will be inspired. And the ones who aren't, well, they'll either adjust or they'll keep running from their own reflection. Either way, you keep shining. Your invisible crown seen by heaven, felt by all. Chosen one. If you've made it this far, you already know you're not the same person they counted out. You're not here by accident. You're not walking in this authority because of luck. You carry something far greater than titles, applause, or recognition. You wear a crown, one the world may never fully see, but the spirit realm recognizes every time you enter a room. That's why things feel different now. Why people respond to your presence before you even speak. Because true power, it's not loud, it's not performative. It's felt. You didn't have to force this moment. You didn't have to beg for validation. Heaven already signed off on your elevation. And while some people are still confused, still triggered by your calm dominance, understand this. They were never supposed to understand. Your journey was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving to yourself that what God placed inside you was always enough. You survived what was meant to break you. You rose when no one was watching. And now you stand as living proof that the most unshakable power comes from alignment, not approval. You don't need to explain your glow. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need to shrink for anyone's comfort. Because when you walk in divine authority, the right people will recognize it, and the wrong ones will remove themselves. That's the beauty of this season. You're not chasing anything. You're attracting everything that's aligned with who you've become. So wear that invisible crown with grace, not to boast, but to remind yourself that you've already been crowned in places no audience could witness. And for those still watching, still wondering how you did it, let them wonder. Because by the time they figure it out, you'll be too far ahead, building, growing, thriving in a realm they can't access because it wasn't designed for performance. It was reserved for purpose. Now, before you go, if this message resonated with the power you know you carry deep within, like this video to affirm your journey, subscribe. If you're ready to walk fully in your calling, and surround yourself with a community that sees you for who you truly are. And drop a $9.99 in the comments if you know your crown doesn't need to be seen to shift atmospheres. Share this with someone who's been quietly rising. Someone who needs to be reminded that their power isn't measured by noise, but by the weight of their presence. Chosen one, your story isn't just survival. It's a blueprint for transformation. You didn't just make it through, you became everything they said you couldn't. And this is only the beginning. Stay aligned. Stay grounded. And never forget, you were crowned long before they noticed you were royalty. We're in this together. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep walking like the atmosphere recognizes who you are, because it does.